Stoicism is a tradition of Hellenistic philosophy founded by Zeno of Citium in the early 3rd century BC. It's probably fair to say that Stoicism is one of the most popular philosophies among people today, given how its ideas have influenced everyone from Marcus Aurelius to Nelson Mandela. But obviously, it didn't just spring into existence from nothing. Before it reached the ears of these great figures, there were countless others who helped develop, mold and spread the ideas of Stoicism throughout the ancient world. One such person was a certain Archidemus of Tarsus. He was a prominent Stoic philosopher who lived during the 2nd century BC, and his life and teachings had a significant impact on shaping the future of Stoicism. Sadly, however, very little is known about him today. So let's try to put that right. Today we're going to look at the life and legacy of Archidemus of Tarsus. This video is part of a series on the major figures of Stoicism. If you enjoy it, please do subscribe and leave a comment below because it helps my channel grow. Thanks for your support. We begin with a brief overview of what little we know about the life of Archimachus. All surviving sources agree that he was from Tarsus, a city located on the Mediterranean coast of Cilicia. Modern day, of course, is a part of Turkey. This much is pretty obvious. However, some scholars debate whether this Archidemus was from the same place as another famous Archidemus, the sophist, playwright and poet who lived in the late 3rd century BC and whose works were quite well known in antiquity. The sophist Archidemus is also thought to have been a native of Tarsus. Some scholars think that this must have been the same individual, but the sheer difference in dates makes this unlikely. It's more plausible that they are two different people. Aside from his birthplace, very little is known about Archideus' life. Most of what we know comes from a single letter written by Roman philosopher Pliny the Younger to his friend Lucius Cassius, in which Pliny mentions having met a Stoic philosopher from Tarsus named Archideus. According to Pliny, he met him either in Athens or on the recommendation of Athenodorus of Athens, the prominent Stoic philosopher whom we've covered in a previous episode, who was something of a mentor to both Cicero and the younger Seneca. The only other piece of information that we get about Archideus' life comes from a letter written by Roman Emperor Hadrian to his adoptive brother and co-heir, Antinous. In it, Hadrian tells Antinous that a man from Tarsus named Archidemus, along with another man from Athens, has been accused of plotting against him. We don't know if Archidemus was executed or not, but this is our last piece of information regarding his life. Based on this evidence, most scholars place his life between approximately 160 BC and 70 BC. So with that brief sketch of his life out of the way, let us move on to the main focus of this episode, the legacy of Archidemus and what we can learn about Stoicism through the lens of his teachings. In order to understand how Archimachus contributed to the development of Stoicism, it helps to first have an understanding of the state of Stoicism during his lifetime. As we saw in our videos on Zeno and Cleanthes, Stoicism in its early days was primarily concerned with issues of ethics and living a good life in accordance with nature. Zeno taught that virtue was the sole good and that the wise person should strive to live a life guided by wisdom, justice, courage, and moderation. When Cleanthes succeeded Zeno as head of the Stoipoikle, he continued to emphasize the importance of living a virtuous life. But he took things a step further and began to incorporate the concept of fate or destiny into the philosophy. Fate in Cleanthes' thought refers to a rational ordering of the universe that determines the course of human events. According to Cleanthes, it was the duty of the wise person to understand and accept their place in this cosmic order. And this led him to develop the idea of apathy, which doesn't mean indifference or lack of caring, but rather freedom from emotional disturbance. By accepting what fate has in store for them, the wise person can attain a state of tranquility and peace of mind. The next figure in the lineage of Stoic philosophers after Cleanthes was Chrysippus. Where Cleanthes emphasized the rational aspect of fate, Chrysippus focused more on the ethical implications. He taught that the wise person should always choose to do what is right, regardless of the consequences. Chrysippus also developed the idea of the Stoic ideal of indifference towards external things. This doesn't mean that Stoics are uninterested in external events, but rather that they recognize that true happiness and fulfillment come from within and that they should not be swayed by the ups and downs of fortune. So where does Archidemus fit into all of this? What made him stand out from other Stoics of his time? Unfortunately, as we mentioned earlier, almost nothing is known about Archidemus' teachings, so it's hard to say for sure. However, we do have some clues. As we mentioned earlier, he was reportedly the student of Cleanthes and the contemporary of Chrysippus, which means that his teachings would have been heavily influenced by them. He likely shared their belief in the importance of living a virtuous life in accordance with nature, as well as their emphasis on the concepts of fate and apathy. However, what set Archidemus apart from other Stoics was his particular focus on the idea of living in agreement with nature. For Archimachus, living in agreement with nature meant recognizing one's place in the natural order of things and accepting the inevitable. He taught that the wise person should not resist fate, but should instead learn to adapt and make the best of whatever situation they find themselves in. This idea is reflected in a letter written by Pliny the Younger to his friend Lucius Cassius, in which he describes a conversation he had with Archidemus. In it, Pliny says that Archidemus told him that there are three kinds of people in the world: those who are good and do good, those who are bad and do bad, and those who are good but do bad. Of these three types, the worst are those who are good but do bad. For example, someone who is naturally courageous but chooses to flee in the face of danger, or someone who is naturally compassionate but chooses to ignore the suffering of others. According to Archimachus, the task of the philosopher is to examine themselves carefully so that they do not fall into this third category. We can see here how Archimachus' idea of living in agreement with nature entails a deep sense of self-awareness and responsibility. By understanding their own nature and tendencies, individuals can strive to live lives that are more authentic and true to who they are. Another thing that set Archimachus apart from other Stoics was his approach to rhetoric. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Archimachus did not view rhetoric as a tool for persuasion or manipulation, but rather as a means of self-improvement. He believed that the study of rhetoric could help individuals become more aware of their own biases and assumptions and could help them to see the world in a more objective light. This idea is reflected in a letter written by Pliny the Younger to his friend Lucius Cassius, in which he quotes Archidemus as saying that those who want to be understood must first understand themselves. Through rhetoric, individuals could develop the ability to express themselves clearly and effectively, but more importantly, they could cultivate the capacity for self-reflection and critical thinking. Finally, we should also mention that Archimachus was a strong advocate of cosmopolitanism, which was a key tenet of Stoic philosophy. For Archimachus, the idea that one should be a citizen of the world meant that one should be open to the ideas and perspectives of people from all cultures and backgrounds. He believed that the wise person should not be limited by their own cultural biases, but should instead strive to understand the world in a more universal and inclusive way. This idea is reflected in a letter written by Pliny the Younger to his friend Lucius Cassius, in which he describes how Archidemus taught that one should not despise barbarians, that is non-Greek or non-Roman peoples, nor should one prefer Greeks to Scythians, for the truth is that all men are barbarians. In other words, our common humanity is what makes us truly valuable, not our ethnicity or cultural background. To conclude, while much of the details of Archimachus' life remain a mystery, his contributions to the development of Stoicism are clear. His emphasis on the importance of living in agreement with nature, his approach to rhetoric, and his commitment to cosmopolitanism all played a significant role in shaping the future of Stoic thought. Though he may be lesser known than some of his contemporaries such as Zeno, Cleanthes, or Chrysippus, Archidemus' legacy lives on in the ideas of later Stoics such as Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. And it is through figures like Archidemus that we can truly appreciate the depth and complexity of Stoic philosophy. If you enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe and leave a comment below because it helps my channel grow. Thanks for your support. Also, big thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to support the channel directly, please consider supporting me through the link in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.